All right, ladies and gentlemen of Australia, we're here with Nelson from Horo Tips. We don't have the Horo Tips over in Australia, but we're going to have a chat to Nelson today. He'll give us a little bit of a rundown, give us some information. He'll tell us a couple about tips. They've got some shapers as well, I believe. And they've got a few different tips too, so some specifically for Blackball, specifically for breaking, can't speak, and some other tips that you can just use on a general part of the game. And I'll let Nelson have a chat. So tell us about the tips to start with.
So we develop tips for breaking and jumping that are going to be different for everything that we ever tried. Because everything that is on the market is about being powered and hard. A hard tip can break more because it's brute force on the rack. And we develop a tip that can generate spin. So if you get more spin on the cue ball, it means that the rack can open more with less power and less spins on the cue ball. And for that we develop a special tip for Blackball because the mass is different, the interaction between the balls are different. We develop a tip for breaking and jumping for pool. Yes. And we have a shaper that we develop because people use shapers and they are constantly changing the sandpaper. So we develop one that is a stainless steel sandpaper, so it lasts a long life, like at least 5 years. And it's what we're trying to do is trying to bring the best to the market, but it's still everybody can have afford it, and so everybody can have access to the best material as possible.
Okay. So the steel sandpaper. So is that going to work on any single tip? Is it best used on Horo tips?
No, what we go for the stainless steel is for the long lasting, and because when people trying to, for example, take the dome of a shape on a leather tip, they use the pickup stings, so they destroy a lot of layers. With our shaper, what you can do is the small shaping, because it's very aggressive, small shaping and keep the leather tip on, but if you still have extra tip, you just press it on the tip, so you don't need to press all the way the layers down, so it's just like microns on the leather, and it's still fine, so you can double the life of the leather tip.
Okay, interesting. Now with the breaking tip, we're actually seeing a lot of our top tier players are starting to use breaking cues that are separate to their playing cues. So we're only just seeing that now in Australia, but it's becoming a bit of a divide now where some people are starting to use that. So can you tell us how the breaking tip is going to be different to a playing tip or even just a blackball tip in itself? Like, how does the breaking tip change in terms of the break itself or the movement of the white ball?
What I can tell you is the amount of spin that you can put on a rack, it's limited by the physicals of the chemicals of the balls. So you can put a lot of spin on the cue ball, but it still only passes a certain amount of spin to the rack. So if you go for backspin, the rack is going to have a lot of topspin. So the tips that are on the market are not efficient. They cannot do it. They're just pushing the rack back and then they explode. This tip, they explode on that spot because since the first time the cue ball hits the rack, all of them gain topspin and they move. What you gain out of it is, if you use just a dedicated breaking cue, and with this tip, you can break with more efficient, less power, less spins, and you can go, for example, like the crazy thing that Wayne Parker does is, he's making championships about how many breaks can you go without losing. They do normally, a normal player, 10 breaks out of 10, and at least they put 1 or 2 balls, and every ball on the table gets open. They do not go stuck in the rails, they don't have clusters, so the game is available. And since that the breaking is at least 67% of a game, I think it's very important for us to have even a $10 cue and put a dedicated tip and then try it and develop a normal stroke, but that can give you the game.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting because essentially at this level, a lot of us know that if you break and pot a ball, you win. If you break and don't pot a ball, you lose. So as you said, the breaking is very important. So that's really nice to hear. So let's go into more into the meat of the game and the actual blackball at tip itself. So how does a blackball tip come about as opposed to any standard tip, say like an elk or at the current is Kamui? That seems to be the flavour of the month. So how does the blackball tip? Because a lot of the people that are watching these videos, they're blackball players. They want to know about the blackball tips themselves. Is it for any single cue? Is it for a specific ferrule? Is there any types of wood that it needs to stick to better? Is the glues different, or is it just the layering? So can you explain a little bit about that for us?
This tip, the only thing is different is because it's a 100% chemical tip. It doesn't have fibers inside, it doesn't have carbon on it, so it's about chemistry, just that. About gluing it, you can glue it with any glue. Any glue works on it. And about applying it, that is one of the best things that we have is every time you test our products, you use the worst cue we can find, the cheapest one, even with wrapping ferrules, damaged ferrules, brass, phenolic tips. It doesn't really matter. What it does is we cut it, we glue it, and we go into the table and test it. And what we find now is a cue, for example, of $10 or $12, $20 can do exactly the same as a $10,000 cue, because the problem is on the tip. It's not about the cue. Of course, if you glue it on a very expensive cue, you extra something, but very low price cue can do exactly the same. So what we're trying to do is get this tip to everybody, level the game, so there is no more underdogs. It's depending on your technique, your endurance, your performance on the table, your perfectionism on training, and if you can do that, we have a tip that can enlarge your probabilities of having a good break. And after that, it's just you, it's training, it's spotting balls.
Yep. Well, I think I need a little bit more than a tip to bring me up to the top level of other players, and I'm sure everybody's agreeing with me here, so that's okay. Is there any other products that you're going to be bringing out besides the shaper, the tips? Is there anything else that you guys have? So we've got the website, which we'll post that up on our social media, so people can have a look at those. But is there anything else that you recommend or that's coming out that you can talk about now?
We are developing a prototype for chalk. It's very important for every player to know that a chalk is a part of his routine, pre-shot routine or during the routine, normal routine. So you need to put chalk every time. So if you can bring a chalk that is very cheap, but you can have extra functions on it, so it's going to be wonderful. So this is a future project. And another one is coming very soon, like in 6 months. It's leather tips, special leather tips that you can use, and you can have extra spins on it with no deflection. And that is something huge that we're going to bring on the market, because every tip has a specific filling. It's a filling of an M tip, but you can have the best of an S tip, an M tip, on a hard tip. So there is no deflection on it, extra spins and powers, but you can still feel that is a normal tip.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear. So we'll be bringing back a couple of tips. We'll be bringing back a couple of shapers. As I said, we'll also put the website up there, so anybody who's looking to purchase, jump on board, try them out, let them know how it is, leave them feedback, because this is what they do. All right, thanks guys, and thanks Nelson. Cheers.